Well, I'm going to keep on that same train of thought because it is my number. No, it isn't. Never mind.
Oh,
Let's. I'll say that again. That's fine. Hello and welcome back to the channel. A very special episode with another guest that you have never seen before. It's Chris. Hola.
hello, hello. Thank you for having me, Tom. This is great.
Yeah, very excited to get to this one because one of my favorite artists I haven't talked about in detail on the channel, but I talked about, I think I did a video ages ago where I was talking about underrated artists from each decade. I'm pretty sure for the 90s I said Ween, but I may be wrong there. I feel like I only remember that because the Mollusk is the thumbnail for that video. But yeah, so Ween are one of our collective favorite bands, I would say. They are up there for me. I know that for sure. And I guess what we can start off with is I'll let you take the floor in terms of how you discovered Ween, what it was that got you into Ween, what songs.
Yeah. Um, Kind of an interesting tale. Maybe not that interesting, but yeah, so obviously I watched the SpongeBob movie when I was a kid and knew Ocean Man from that, from the end of the movie. And I always kind of thought it was just a funny um joke song, which I think a lot of people tend to assume about the general discography of Ween, that they're kind of a joke band. And um, much later in life, I had a good buddy who was posting, was Ween posting all over Instagram all the time. And so I thought, you know what? I remember that one goofy song. I'll check out the Mollusk because he was always posting like clips of songs on Instagram. You get like, 20 seconds that you can attach to a story. And so I would hear just little bits of, the Mollusk or Mutilated Lips, stuff like that. So I decided to give the Mollusk a full listen, and it just blew my mind how awesome and cohesive, and how no one else was talking about this in my realm of friends who were really into bands like Flaming Lips and Radiohead and like other kind of alt 90s oeuvre was, very very popular among my mates. So was just very surprised that I hadn't kind of heard them before and that this hadn't been done before. um so that's really where I started, and then I started to piece out songs from Chocolate and Cheese, um, which frankly before like 2016, I don't think I had heard a single track from. Um, and it just kind of grew from there. I just started popping off albums, and I think inadvertently I kind of listened to the entire discography, but very broken, and certainly gravitated towards kind of the ones I started with, as we'll get into uh, later. But yeah, that's kind of my story with Ween. It started not too long ago, but I did hit the ground running. Um, I've now seen Ween twice live, which I highly recommend if you're able to get the chance. I've bought too much of their merch. Um, and I like to talk about them when whenever appropriate, or maybe less than appropriate. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, I think kind of mirroring what you were saying, Ocean Man, as I imagine a lot of people in our generation, well, I say our, you're older than me, but we're in a similar ballpark, I would say. Um, and yeah, I remember watching the movie and that song, and I don't think it stuck with me as much as it stuck with other people. The song that stuck with me was Loop De Loop, which
Okay.
they
Right.
also
Right.
did for SpongeBob,
Also Ween.
um, which is quite a funny tidbit. I didn't even know that was them until quite recently. Um, but then, yeah, I only really started getting into music when I was 15 or so, so about 6 or 7 years ago. And Ween weren't exactly, like you said, they're not mentioned in the same breath as bands like Radiohead. And I think a lot of the reason for that, again, is that they are unfairly branded as a comedy band. I think the same applies to Frank Zappa. I'm not the biggest Frank Zappa fan, but I think a lot of people are just like, hey, he's the one with the Piss in the Snow song, you know, um, don't eat the yellow snow, whatever it is. And it's like, yeah, I mean, they have a lot of songs that are funny, but those songs are also really well done musically. And yeah, the first one I heard was the Mollusk. I liked it. I didn't love it when I first heard it. Then a few years later, I heard Chocolate and Cheese, and I liked it. I didn't love it. And then I heard Chocolate and Cheese again, and I think something clicked in my mind. I was like, whoa, every single song on this album is completely different. Like
Yeah,
the only other
yeah.
album I can think of that's like that is the White Album by the Beatles, where every single song is a new musical idea. So that was what drew me back to that album. And then obviously the Mollusk and all the other albums. But yeah, all that aside, you'd heard all of these before going in, all 10 of these?
I had, although it had been quite a long time since I heard The Pod and La Cucaracha. Um, I had listened to them kind of once a long time ago and hadn't really returned, minus a couple of um, key tracks. And and then Godween Satan, that one I may not have actually listened to all the way through before this. So, I definitely knew several tracks from it, but I don't know if I had sat down and listened to the entire thing. So, those three I was definitely not terribly familiar with. The rest of the discography I knew pretty well before listening to this, but it was a great excuse to go back through everything, and especially the early stuff that I didn't know so well.
Yeah, very similar boat as you. I had heard 7 of these 10, and the 3 you mentioned were the 3 I'd never heard before. So
Sure.
yeah, I guess I'll start us off then. So my number 10 won't be much surprise to anyone, even the most diehard of Ween fans. It's The Pod. It is their second album. And you know what? I'm probably not the only one, but I would be lying if I said I wasn't incredibly intimidated by this album. It has quite the reputation. And I don't think it's quite as unlistenable as I expected. I think because of how people talk about it. Um, but at the same time, it's landed at the bottom of the list. It's not my favorite style. It's very much it gets to a point where it does get quite hard to sit through. There's like a middle stretch of the album where there's like 7 or 8 tracks in a row, and you're just like, man, this is a lot. It's a long album as well. It's like 70 minutes. Um, but there is some stuff I like. I think Strap On that Jammy Pack has a cool feel. There's gonna be a lot of silly song names that I'm gonna have to say with a straight face. Um, I think Dr. Rock kind of slaps. This is also where we get the Stallion Part One, part of an epic tale. One of the funnier tracks on the album for me. Um, I think the songs all do feel quite a bit longer than they actually are, which is and it's sort of a far cry. The sort of drum machine psychedelic feel of this album is a far cry from the punky raw nature of the debut. It's almost like a complete switch, which they did quite a lot in their career. Pollo Asado is very, very stupid, but I kind of love it at the same time. It is a very, very entertaining track. Right to the Ways and the Rules of the World is pretty cool as well. I like the acoustic guitar that drives through that song. Um, and then, yeah, you get tracks like Demon Sweat and Molly and Awesome Sound, which uh, not great. Just a lot of yeah. Like I said, there's like 8 tracks that I'm quite indifferent to. Mononucleosis is a nice sort of pick me up after a lot of not great stuff. I think Oh My Dear Falling in Love is nice. Sketches of Winkle actually is one of the few tracks that I think could fit on the debut. It has a bit more of an energetic vibe to it. Um, and yeah, I don't know. They could have. I feel like it's frustrating because I think the sound is interesting, but it definitely does not need to be as long as it is. There are a lot of tracks you could very easily cut without thinking. Um, and then, of course, you get Pork Roll, Egg and Cheese, which is a banger buried towards the end of the album.
Hmm.
Um, maybe I'm more lenient because I love Ween, but I'm at a 5 out of 10 on this. I think it's bloated with some cool highlight tracks, namely yeah, Sketches of Winkle, Pork Roll, Egg and Cheese, and Oh My Dear, Falling in Love. I like all those tracks. But yeah, 5 out of 10 for the pod, but the only way is up from here.
Great. That definitely makes sense. I don't think you're alone in rating that as the lowest. Um, my number 10 is La Cucaracha.
Mm.
Um, and I'll talk about the pod soon, but La Cucaracha for me, I don't hate the album. Um, I don't hate any of their albums. I don't hate them. But La Cucaracha, I think, is just kind of a disappointing end to the career. And I just think that it has a lot of forgettable tracks. I get kind of lost in songwriting that just really feels like they were out of ideas. And it becomes evident um, just 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 throughout the whole album. That said, I do really like Sweetheart in the Summer. I think that's a great track. I kind of forgot about it, so I was happy to listen through this album again. My Own Bare Hands is a lot less fun sitting in my house listening to than it is live. It's a great live track. It's a crowd favorite, and you know, Diener just sounds great screaming it. So, um, kind of reminiscent of some of their older, more childish tracks. And then I do think Your Party is just kind of a perfect swan song for the band. The last recorded song. Um, and I think that it's a beautiful track. I always send it to people after my wife and I go to a party the next day just to thank them. Instead of leaving a bottle of wine, I just send them a Ween track. And I think that this album, if you're into Ween, I think it's still worth your time. I think that it has some notable gems. I do think some get lost and are just not very strong songwriting. Um, this is not going to be the album that gets you into Ween. If you heard this first, you would probably not be interested. Um, I would say kind of for fans only who want a little more. Um, I give it a generous 6 out of 10 because I'm partial to Ween, and I probably give them something of a pass where others might not. But it is my number 10, La Cucaracha. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with anything you said. I'm not mentioning it quite yet because my number 9 is Pure Guava, uh,
Oh,
the third album. And I don't know, I feel like there are some people that really love this album, and especially diehard Ween fans. I don't know if you're aware of a podcast called Velocities in Music. They no longer do videos anymore, but they had a video. They were big, both of them big Ween fans, and Pure Guava was one of their favorites. And I just don't see it. I think it's definitely a step up after the pod. I think there are more, musical moments on here. And yeah, obviously this is the third album, but it was the first in the chronology that I'd heard before. Um, I think the Stallion Part Three is pretty cool. Like I said, very important that we get the closure from the Stallion Part One. We need to know what happened, so I'm glad that they gave us that. I think Big Jilm is pretty fun. Like nice, I wrote nice ooh ooh oohs, which a very technical term there in my notes. I think Push the Little Daisies is a fun little track. Pumping for the Man is again a bit punkier. My favorite track on this has always been Sarah. I think it's really pretty, just great. Spring Theme, I think is pretty nice. Flies on My Dick, great guitar parts in that song. Um, yeah, I think there are also songs like Morning Glory, which are a bit harder to get through, a bit more brown, you could say. Um, and yeah, I think Love You Through It All is a pretty pleasant track. But then you don't get too close to My Fantasy towards the end, which has a really beautiful guitar tone, almost reminiscent of sort of shoegaze of the time, which I think is quite cool. And that was one of my big discoveries this time. That was kind of a track that I slept on, and I was glad to discover it again on this listen. But yeah, Pure Guava. I don't know. That was another thing I meant to point out as well is that I don't remember where I saw this, but there was people saying that almost every Ween album, the penultimate track is the best song, and I think that applies to a lot of them. I mean, if you think Pork Roll, Egg and Cheese, and Don't Get Too Close to My Fantasy, and we'll get to some others, which
I'll
definitely
keep that in mind. Yeah.
yeah, we could definitely make the argument. But yeah, so Pure Guava is definitely more listenable than the pod. Definitely not for everyone. Neither of these albums are for everyone. They're not gonna, you were saying La Cucaracha is probably the last album you'd show to someone to get them into Ween. I think these would also be down there because they're not very palatable. They're kind of unapologetic in their style, which in a way is very charming. But if I'm honestly rating on how likely I am to listen to it again, it's quite low. So I'm at a 6 for Pure Guava. I think it's decent. I think
Okay. Okay.
there's some good highlights like Sarah and like Don't Get Too Close to My Fantasy and like Pumping for the Man. But yeah, it's not, again, it's also quite long. Um,
Yes.
so yeah, it lands at number 9 for me, but it's going to get better quite quickly. So
Okay. Number 9, Pure Guava. Fair enough. Um, I'm not going to talk about Pure Guava yet. I will talk about the pod, which is my number 9. You said a lot, and I don't have a lot that I disagree with. This record is difficult for me, in a couple of respects. After coming off their debut, which was actually recorded in a studio, and though they go for kind of a lo-fi punk sound, it sounds great. Like the production actually sounds very good on Godwin Satan. And to move into the pod where they used full drum machine and 4-track cassettes, it just sounds kind of antiquated and cheap, and not in a great way. Um, Not in a very fun way to sit through. So it is very brown. It might be the most brown of all, for better or worse. And I do think there are some hints of good songwriting here. You can tell that Diener is kind of getting more experimental, and I think there's moments of greatness throughout some of the chaos on the pod, but that's a lot to ask of someone to sit through the entire album. As you mentioned, there's a lot of tracks that could be thrown out here. It's probably too long. That said, I'm a big fan of Dr. Rock. Um, I actually really like Demon Sweat. I know you said that's a tough one for you to get through. That's one that's in my notes here. I love Demon Sweat, and of course, Pork Roll, Egg and Cheese, central theme of the album. You could make the argument for. Those are all heavy plays for me. I do think this album is worth the experience. Um, just to say you've done it. I don't think I regret listening to it, but definitely sitting through Pollo Asado and all these other tracks that just kind of force you to sit through them, then then let you enjoy them. Um, I unfortunately cannot give it more than a 6. That is, I do rate it above La Cucaracha. I think there are more notable moments on this album, but what really drags it down are the number of songs that I think aren't necessary, and the overall sound is just difficult to listen to an entire album of. I think it's kind of fun, but I think it gets in its own way of being fun a lot of the time. And so for that, the pod ends at number 9. It was nice to re-listen to it, but it will not be in my top played Ween albums anytime soon.
no, that's a very good way of putting it. And yeah, don't worry, I haven't done anything crazy because we're still talking about the same albums. And my number 8
Yes.
is La Cucaracha,
Okay.
which I can definitely see where you're coming from, especially since you have more of an affinity for the earlier stuff. Um, yeah, I think this is probably, I don't know if you'd agree, probably considered the black sheep of their discography. Because even those earlier songs kind of have their fans. This one is, I think most people agree that it's disappointing. I feel like where the pod and Pure Guava are quite divisive, this one is kind of everyone is mid on it, so people just forget that it exists.
Yeah, yeah.
But with that said, I was pleasantly surprised, perhaps because my expectations were in the gutter, and
Okay,
I actually took quite a few tracks. I think Fiesta is a very bizarre way to open with an instrumental. I mean, it's okay. It's not bad. It's just like it happens, and then you just into the next track. But then I think we get a run of really, really good songs. I really like Blue Balloon. It's not particularly exciting, but it's pretty.
sure.
I think Friends feels like another song that could have been on SpongeBob, which is kind of I don't know, sort of made me gravitate towards it a little bit as well. I think Object is really pretty as well. Learning to Love is just ridiculous. Um, Ridiculous vocals on that, and very much reminiscent of the 12 Golden Country Greats album, which I liked. I think yeah, those five songs with my own bare hands as well. That sort of stretch is quite well sequenced, and all those songs flow together quite nicely. None of them are top tier, but they're all good, well written songs. Then is when I kind of agree with what you're saying about the writing. Very generic, I thought, a lot of the songs. What I liked is how specific their lyricism can be on their best stuff, and how they can use these abstract concepts and make them into these ridiculous songs. But here they're just sort of yeah. The Fruitman is a slog. I think Spirit Walker is a nice instrumental, but the auto tune is very strange. Not sure what that decision was. Uh, Shame Maker is got kind of annoying vocals as well, but it is kind of a good song in its core. Um, and then yeah, you mentioned Sweetheart in the Summer, really nice song, great strings. But I actually think the two best songs on the album are the last two. I think Woman and Man is starts off the actual start of the song is like, oh, this sounds a bit boring. And then it goes into this jam and you're like, oh shit, what's this? Like 2 minutes in. And then it's just like pure 8 minutes of grooves. And I just think it's great. I wasn't getting bored of it or anything. I thought it was really well paced and earns the 10 minutes. And then, we can't say for sure that they are done forever because they're still touring together, but it's 95% that they will not release another studio album. And while this album, it's only ranked at number 8, I don't think it's the best way to go out. I do agree. Your Party is a great final statement for the band. Really like the sax on that song. Um, yeah, it's far from their best work. It was a good listen. I actually listened to it for the first time today, so it's quite
Okay,
fresh in my mind.
very fresh.
Um, but I think yeah, there's plenty of good songs. Yeah, I think other than Your Party, there's nothing that really was in any kind of contention for my songs list, which
Hmm.
does drag it down. But I still give it a 7. I think it's solid. I think it's good. Um, it's on the lower end of a 7. It's kind of on the borderline, but
Okay,
I think you can do a lot worse. But I do agree. There's
we
7
take
other
sevens.
albums that I'd rather show someone to introduce them to Ween.
Sure, sure. Yeah, no, a lot of fair points. Object, I forgot to talk about. I'm pretty sure that's about a serial killer. Like his point of view, he just views you as an object. Um, that's kind of a creepy one. But yeah, no, you made some fair points, and you know, I'll listen to it again. I'm not gonna abstain from La Cucaracha. Um, let's see. My number 8. Hopefully this isn't controversial. I'm going with Shinola Volume 1. Um, this album, which we were never graced with a volume 2 of, um, was kind of a collection of um reject songs or demos from other albums, and you can kind of almost tell which albums some songs would have been pieced with, which is kind of neat. It kind of feels like this adventure through the discography, um, which is fun in and of itself. I do kind of appreciate that. However, it is quite a bit less cohesive than a lot of other albums, and I guess that's to be expected from something that is basically a compilation album. That said, there are a lot of bangers on this album, and regardless of the ordering of the album or how it flows as an album, it's really hard to deny several of these tracks. And most notably, I have Gabrielle, which is just beautiful. Did You See Me, I think, is an excellent slower track. And my favorite on the whole album is I Fell in Love Today, which is just beautiful. Um, I also like Monique the Freak, but I get that that one's a little I think that's a great kind of tail end to the album. I don't know what else to say about this. I think that it was kind of hard for me to rank because I knew a lot of other albums better than this one. I had heard this one maybe once or twice and kind of wrote a lot of it off because it is kind of a compilation. And I actually really like this album. I think this is starting at number 8 is where I can say I actually really like this album. Um, so there's a lot of highlights here. There's not quite enough cohesion or moments of greatness to elevate it above number 8 for me. But I am confident. I would recommend anyone who is even kind of into Ween eventually get to this album. I'm not going to tell people to shy away from it. I just think they have 7 better albums. This gets a strong 7 for me. Shinola Volume 1.
Yep, well said. I will be talking about that one very soon, but not quite yet. My number 7 is going to be the debut album, God, Ween, Satan. Um, I think much like what you're saying, for me, it's from 7 up, where it's hard to split these, especially these next 3. I feel quite similarly about all of them.
Mm.
But this one is a great way for Ween to announce themselves to the world. I think especially the first 10 tracks, just absolutely killer. Amazing punk rock, great energy. Obviously opens with You Fucked Up, which is one of their best opening tracks. I mean, it doesn't really get much better than that. It's so plain and simple. I think Tick carries the momentum well. I'm in the Mood to Move introduces us to their comedic side. Um, and then you got Fat Lenny, which is pretty awesome. I think Don't Laugh, I Love You starts off threatening to be the most accessible song on the album, but then in the outro, it completely descends into chaos, which is so cool. Um, Wayne's Pet Youngin is great as well. I think Nicole is interesting. I did it kind of surprised me how much I enjoyed it, given how brown it is, shall we say. Um, and I think while they are still figuring themselves out and what they want to be, because obviously they don't really return to this punk sound very much again after this album, maybe, the occasional track, but I think there is definitely a sense that they are slowly, they're almost there with what they want to be. There's some killer guitar solos, great tone, especially on Common Bitch, I think. Really, really good guitar on that song. I think El Camino is great. Kind of, the things they do with accents is kind of foreshadowed on that song. I think the songs are pretty catchy for the most part. Fast paced, loads of fun. I think Stacy is practically just an excuse to showcase some guitar, which is, not really mentioned the guitar much in these earlier albums, but
Mm.
one of my favorite guitar players, and he is really shredding it on that song. LMLYP is cool, even as someone who isn't massively into Prince compared to a lot of people. I still managed to enjoy it as a sort of one-off track. I think Hippie Smell kind of sounds like REM, which I think is kind of fun. And then, yeah, you got Birthday Boy, which is great, really harsh, loud guitar, but this dreamy atmosphere, nice contrast. Blackjack was one of the few songs I knew going in because I remember one of my friends was like, he said something about Spanish Eddie or something, and I was like, "What are you talking about?" And then he was like, "Listen to this song. You got to listen to this song." So I did, and I was like, "That's not music, but
You're like, what
it's
is this?
yeah, yeah, it's kind of fun, but at the same time, yeah, I don't know. I don't listen to it much, but I kind of have a nice soft spot for it because of that reason that I remember hearing it and my friend recommending it to me. It's probably the one of their best brown songs, if you want to put it that way. I would say very fun. Um, I think Marble Tulip Juicy Tree is awesome, and maybe could be my favorite on the whole album, possibly. And then yeah, Puffy Cloud is fun. I don't know. I think I have a real soft spot for this album because this kind of reminds me of the kind of stupid music I make with my friends. Just jokes that nobody else is going to get, that are inside jokes that you don't elaborate on, and a lot of songs that feel like they were made up on the spot. And I don't know, I just love that energy, and that's kind of a lot of the reason why I like this album, even though I can acknowledge that some people wouldn't be as big on it. But yeah, strong 7. Feels a bit harsh putting it that low, but I do think it's really cool, and it has some really great highlight tracks, and yeah, put put a good trajectory for them for the rest of their career.
Um, I will get to that one. Uh, I'm not quite there yet. My number 7 is Pure Guava. Um, again, I said after the last album that I like all of these records going forward. Um, Pure Guava was their first major label record, so they got signed to Elektra Records. But they still opted to use this cheap recording 4-track cassette, and the drum machine is featured on, I think, every track. Um, but I do think the songwriting chops here are pretty good. I think there's a lot of cohesion. Um, I'm still very shocked the executives at Elektra signed them and agreed to release this thing, because there is a good amount of chaos throughout this, and it's hard for me now not to ignore some of the lyrics that come in, satirical or not. I'm not going to sing along, and pumping for the man, reggae junkie Jew, just just kind of hard to deal with now. I can appreciate what they are, and for the time, kind of the vibe they were pushing, but um, those are difficult. They don't ruin the album for me. Push the Little Daisies is really interesting. It was kind of their first and maybe only hit. It actually got good radio play and was on Beavis and Butthead. The video was kind of popular on MTV in the early 90s. So that kind of pushed them into some kind of status in the alt rock 90s sphere, although obviously there were monsters of alternative rock in the 90s that they were probably not going to compete with submitting Push the Little Daisies. So they had their moment, and they were kind of pushed into another level briefly. When they hit on this album, I think they hit really well. um there are some songs that I didn't really miss on my listen through. I do know this album pretty well. This might have been the first kind of non more like core or recent albums that we would typically recommend someone get into Ween, that I was listening to explore the brown side. Um, but I do think Big Jill is just one of my favorites. My wife and I always joke about the biggest damn done thing you ever did see, Big Jill. And I really like Touch My Tutor. I think that's just a goofy, great song. I just love the melody on that. Uh, Don't Get Too Close to My Fantasy, I think is just beautiful. You mentioned shoegaze guitar. I totally agree. It's very dreamy sounding, and the vocals are almost Bowie-esque. I don't know quite what they were going for, but I think it just works. I think it's a great song, and obviously Sarah is a great track. You know, you get the Morning Glory, you get the Poop Ship Destroyer, and it reminds you that this band does go there, and they'll put you through that. But I do think the standouts on this album really um make it a pretty nice experience overall. I think there's a lot of good here. and I give it a 7 out of 10. It is my number 7. It is Pure Guava. I like this album.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Um, I don't dislike it. I don't dislike it at all. It's
Yeah.
uh, it's decent. So my number six, I've already spoiled this for Chris because I messed up my order, but my number six is Shinola Volume One, which I only recently listened to as well because pretty sure we were in a listening party, I think, when I first heard it together on Discord, and that was very fun. We did a series of them, introducing a lot of people to this band, and yeah, this was new to me, and I did know Gabrielle going in, and yeah, you're right, it's one of the better songs on the album. I think "Tastes Good on the Bun" is the first time I heard it, I was like, but it is pretty amusing, and I would be lying if I said it doesn't get stuck in my head. Sometimes I think about that song and I'm like, yeah, that's kind of catchy, and then it's stuck in my head for days, and it's kind of annoying, but it's all right. It's a fun little song. The song I felt most conflicted about was "Boys Club," which I remember I first listened to it, and it's very them doing their crude lyrics again. And I think at the time I was listening to it, I was like, but I've given myself up to its charm. It's a great song. It's fantastic. Really great guitar, really catchy. Just really, really like it. I Found Love Today is okay. Not the biggest fan of it, I must admit. Um,
Okay.
yeah, Gabrielle is great. Do You See Me is cool. Transitions is sort of more in the 80s synth pop realm, which is cool. Um, Israel is usually considered the worst song on the album, but I think it's quite cool. I like the horns on that song. And yeah, and then I think it ends really strong, like you mentioned with Monique the Freak, them doing their Prince worship again. And I think that is a pretty solid track. And then Someday, I think is really, really, really sweet and sentimental, and I really like that track, and it was one of my favorite recent discoveries from the band. So yeah, not much else to say. I don't think there's much to say about sequencing because I think you nailed it. Like it's quite disjointed, but I think their albums can feel like that anyway because they like chucking so many different styles at the wall, especially on an album that we'll get to. Which, but yeah, I think it's solid. I think the best stuff on it, could have elevated the albums that they were recorded intended to be on. Um, and yeah, Shelvine want another strong 7, good album, solid album. I would say it's an essential listen for any fan of the band, but not one of their best because it's not technically an album. But we're counting it because it's worth talking about.
We're counting it. Very good. Yeah, don't disagree. Again, I like that album. Forgot to call out Someday. Definitely, definitely a good song. Um, my number 6. That's where we're at now, right? My number 6 is God Ween Satan. Um, in listening through this, I love this. I thought this was just an absolute riot. Knowing this was their first album, knowing this is how they decided to show the world what kind of what kind of band they are. This is just so much fun. Um, you mentioned the first like multiple tracks, and I just agree. Starting off with "You Fucked Up" is just an excellent, excellent opener, and just tells you everything you need to know right off the bat. It was recorded in a studio, as I mentioned, so the sound actually is quite good, though they still kind of go for this lo-fi vibe. Um, there's a lot of short, fun, punky songs that get into, obviously experimental territory very quickly. You get this avant-garde sense, a lot of humor, a lot of chaos just thrown into this album that for me is just so workable. Um, it's a very fun experience. Um, you know, I think the highlights are definitely "You Fucked Up." That's one of the best tracks here. I really love LMLYP, and I love "Don't Laugh, I Love You." Both of those I get could be divisive. Um, but I think they're both very good. Nicole is, you mentioned that, and I think I like it. I think I've come around to it. It is like 9.5 minutes long, so um that is sometimes difficult, but I think I'm growing on Nicole. And one of my favorite tracks from Ween period is on this album. Birthday Boy is just such a beautiful, heartbreaking song. I love the guitar tones. I think it was somehow recorded over part of Echoes by Pink Floyd, so there's this weird dissonance going on, and it kind of just adds to the heartbreak feeling that the lyrics are conveying. Birthday Boy, great track. You probably don't need to listen to the whole album if you're just interested in listening to that because this is quite a wild ride, but I gotta tell you, I loved it. I loved it more than I remembered. It makes my number six. I think it's a strong album. I give it an 8 out of 10.
Nice.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, Birthday Boy kind of reminds me a bit of like Jesus and Mary Chain and like those kind of
Mm.
noise pop bands. So yeah, very. They don't have another song like it, which they have a lot of songs that you could say that about. So
Right, right.
I've realized that we have the same top five. That means, and the order is going to be
Oh,
what what
interesting.
we may line up or disagree on. I suspect we might line up at least a couple times, but
We might. We haven't lined up yet, right?
no, we haven't. So my
Okay.
number five is going to be White Pepper, their album from 2000. I, this is a good. It's a good album. I just kind of struggle with this album because part of what I love so much about Ween is the humor and the weirdness, and how you can have a song like you said, like a song like Nicole and a song like Birthday Boy on the same album. That's what I love about them is that they go so wildly between styles. And this is, they have the other album which we'll get to. This is one of only two albums I think where they sort of play it straight and they stick to a style. And this one has even less humor than that album. And I think that I don't know, it definitely suffers for that for me. It's a pleasant listen. It's a good listen all the way through. I'll say it now. I'm at a seven still, but it's my last seven. I think it's a good album, but and it does have some of their best songs. Like Exactly Where I'm At, I think is a great opening track. I think Flutes of Chi is great as well. Um, but my three favorite tracks on the album are Even If You Don't, Bananas and Blow, and Stay Forever. I think they are all just amazing tracks. I think Stroker Ace is a great punk rocker as well, reminiscent of the debut album. And then I think the rest of the album is kind of underwhelming in comparison to those tracks for me. I think Pandy Fackler is okay. It's quite fun. Don't like The Grobe. I think Back to Basem is a bit too sleepy for me. You have Ice Castles, the instrumental. And in the end, it just feels like there's a bit too much filler. And I don't know. I feel like the highs of this album are so high that it drags it above albums like Shinola and like Godwin Satan. And as a straight through listen, it's probably more cohesive than those two. But yeah, I don't know. I've always struggled with this one. I always want to like it more than I actually do because the highlight tracks are among their best, as you will see in my songs ranking. But I think, yeah, I don't know. It's the least Ween album, which is kind of probably why it isn't in the top four. But still really good for what it is.
Okay. I think that's a fair assessment of White Pepper. This will not be a match. I will talk about the other clean cut genre album as my number five is 12 Golden Country Greats. Once again, I like all of these albums from here on out. This was kind of a tough placement for me as well. Um, this album I think is very good. I'll just say that. There's a good amount of like lore behind this album because it is basically a straightforward country album. It was actually recorded at the famed studio Bradley's Barn. Um, Legendary Nashville producer Owen Bradley, who made Patsy Cline, Brenda Lee, Conway Twitty become basically household names. Um, The Bo Bremmels, shout out Aiden, named their 1968 album after this barn. So they're into like legit country territory. This isn't just like a cheap joke. Despite the fact that some studio musicians they hired did drop out because they thought they were being played, um, the ones who stuck around, the performances are incredible. The guitar, steel guitar, lap guitar sounds are just phenomenal. Um, I think most of the guitar work was not done by Dean and Gene. I think that there are a lot of studio musicians filling in for a lot of the sounds here, and they just sound awesome on this record. It is really the only true album. White Pepper, I do agree, mostly stays in kind of eccentric genre, but this is basically country through and through. I think it's beautiful. I think it's hilarious. Um, I think I'm Holding You is a great opener. Um, Japanese Cowboy, maybe has some questionable lyrics, but Piss Up a Rope all the way through Powder Blue, I think is a great stretch. Um, they're quick, funny songs. There's only 10 of them. I think it doesn't overstay its welcome, and I return to many of these pretty often. Um, Especially You Were the Fool. I love that kind of hammer-on riff. It sounds so cool. That just gets stuck in my head all the time. And I don't even really think there's much throwaway on this album. I think it's a cool, concise country album. They just kind of decided to ruin themselves commercially by releasing a fun album because they knew they could. And I think it's very effective. Um, I rate this. It is my number five. I do think there are four better records. I do own this record on vinyl. It's only one of two albums I have. I saw it on the shelf at Powell's Books, shout out, and I just had to pick it up. They had one copy. I couldn't say no, so I had to pick it up. I do spin it frequently. I do love it. It is not in my top four, but it is my number five. It is 12 Golden Country Greats, comprised of 10 good country songs. I give it. I think Gene and Ween are like the other two country greats. I don't know. Um, I give this an 8 out of 10. Um, this was a tough placement. Um, so it does land at number five.
Well, we're always getting so close to lining up because it's my number four. Um,
Oh,
which, yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said. I didn't actually know a lot of the background to it, so thank you for enlightening me with the knowledge. Yeah, I think this is a fantastic sounding album. I think the production is one of their best, in terms of the sound. Yeah, you mentioned "I'm Holding You," great song. I think what there's something weirdly funny about, not all the time because they have some really heartbreaking songs that aren't funny at all, but sometimes when they play it straight, it's kind of like they're playing it straight but with a smirk. And it's like you're kind of trying to figure out how serious. And I think "I'm Holding You" is one of those where I'm like, are they for real or is this a joke? Like, but it's a really good song regardless. Yeah, I think Japanese Cowboy is probably the worst song on the album. I don't like Pretty Girl much either, but I don't really have many complaints about the rest of the album. I think, like you said, Piss Up, Piss Up the Rope is Piss Up a Rope even is fantastic. I think it is them at their most outrageous, and it is also incredibly catchy. And it's one of those songs where you have it stuck in your head and you start singing. You're like, why am I singing that? That's but I've got to the point where I'm past caring because it's fantastic. I don't want to leave you on the farm. It's great. I think the album, if anything, might be a little bit backloaded because then you get some real classic Ween songs like Mr. Richard Smoker, which is a bit more of a 1920s vibe. The Boodly Babu is such a ridiculous thing to put in the chorus. And Help Me Scrape the Mucus Off My Brain is my favorite song on the album. I think it's beautiful. You mentioned the instrumentation, the guitar solo on that song is unbelievable. So good. And then, yeah, you mentioned You Were the Fool as well. Just really lovely. Another one that's played a bit more straight. Yeah, the boys are in top form. in terms of the lyrics and their vocals, and all the session musicians do a great job. Um, there are tremendous tracks, and there are a couple there tracks that kind of drag it down a little bit, but genuinely one of my favorite country is not my favorite genre, and it's one of my favorite country albums because it's like 30 minutes and I can just chuck it on, and the playing's great and great vocals, and there's funny songs and sad songs, and it's just a great mix of everything that makes Ween great. But as as Sam would say, it is not in medal position. So
Not in medal position.
yeah,
Well,
really great though. 8 out of 10. Really, really strong 8 out of 10.
excellent. Um, okay. 8 out of 10. Here we are. We're cruising right along. Um, my number four, obviously this won't be a match. Um, but my number four is white pepper. Um, I put it above Golden Country Greats, and again, this was tough. I give white pepper an 8 out of 10. I'll say that now because I've given Godwin Satan 12 Country Greats and White Pepper all an 8 out of 10. The order of these was pretty difficult for me to establish, but I had to per the rules. And this album definitely the poppiest album, perhaps the most accessible album from just a straight face. Um, and I think they do a great job with that. Um, the first three tracks really set the stage. Uh, you know, in fact, when I've gone to karaoke, sometimes the only Ween song they have there is from White Pepper. It's exactly where I'm at, which is kind of an interesting karaoke song because the instrumental just trails off for the last like 2 minutes. You just be standing there kind of grooving. But I love this album. I love Flutes of Chi. I think that's just a beautiful soundscape. Um, just makes me want to hang out in like a meadow or something. I don't know. It's just a breath of fresh air. Even if you don't, is just a gorgeous melody. I can't believe that hasn't been done before. The piano just sounds so familiar, and it's probably ripped off from the Beatles or something because it just sounds kind of expected, but I think it works. I love the vocals. It has a cool solo in there. And then you go straight into Bananas and Blow, which is unlike the first three. It's totally off the wall. And the first time I heard this song, it was just an instant classic to me in the Ween discography. I knew that this was always going to be a favorite. And Bananas and Blow, love it. Great little story about being locked with nothing to do but eat bananas and do cocaine. Um, Stroker Ace, a little bit weaker. Ice Castles is okay as far as instrumentals go. It's not one of my top instrumentals of theirs. And then you get into the middle of the album, and I think they just kind of get stronger as they go from there. So back to Blossom is okay. The Grobe is fine. I will say that the Grobe into Pandy Fackler is really where you kind of remember that you're in a Ween album, because before then it's like, with the exception of Bananas and Blow, the lyrics are pretty straightforward, and it's all kind of this light sound, this light poppy sound. Um, the Grobe and Pandy Fackler, I think, are kind of the weirdest tracks here. Pandy Fackler has a nice jam session in the middle that when I've seen them live, they kind of just go into an extended jam session. So it's kind of a fun excuse for that, I think, when they play live. But listening to it on the album, it's fine. It's not one of my favorites. Um, and then I think Stay Forever is just a gorgeous song. I managed to sneak this on the soundtrack at my wedding. I think anyone just listening to it would just be like, this is a nice love song. They would have no association with the other odd stuff on this album or any other album. Um, great, beautiful pop song, Stay Forever. And the last two tracks, they're fine. Um, Falling Out, She's Your Baby. I'm not too attached to either of them, but Um, I do think that overall this album just shows up. Again, not too long. It's 12 tracks. Um, for the year 2000, a lot of albums were kind of running long, and I think they keep it fairly concise here with a lot of fun, memorable tracks. It does lose me a little bit, but I love some of these tracks so much that this is just definitely elevated. And for that reason, I have to put it at number 4 above the other eights, like 12 Golden Country Greats and Godwin Satan. White Pepper is my number 4. A lot of gems on this album. This is for sure essential Ween listening. Um, I give it an 8 out of 10.
Well said. And we still haven't matched up, but we have the same top three.
Oh,
So the odds are in our favor, I would say.
probably. We'll see.
um, my number 3 is Chocolate and Cheese, which came out in 1994, which I think is one of the greatest years in music history. I think it is absolutely stacked to the brim with great albums. You think about, the Blue Album and Downward Spiral and Grace and Illmatic, and I could just go on, Dummy, so many great albums.
A lot of
And
bangers.
this is deservedly up there with them for me. I think it is. I remember this is actually, we did a listening party for it, like I mentioned. I remember someone, I think it was Zach, that said, it's like you put your Spotify liked songs on shuffle. That's what this album feels like. And you know what? That is definitely true. Because this is definitely the most diverse Ween album. No two songs sound the same. And for the most part, that is a benefit. But I think in terms of comparing it to the top two, it's a little bit of a hindrance because those albums, while there's a lot of varying in style between the songs, the production kind of ties everything together and gives it a cohesive feel. This one, not so much. That said, Take Me Away is, to me, Ween announcing themselves as we can be one of the best bands in the 90s if we put our minds to it. Because that is just such a romping opener. It's kind of gives the vibe of like an Elvis impersonator or something, and he's like,
Thank you.
yeah, yeah, like the really sort of meek applause, which I really like. And yeah, I think it's just a breath of fresh air after listening, especially in listening in sequence. And you've had Pure Guava and the pod, and you're a bit like, oh, and then Take Me Away comes, and it's like, yeah, hell yeah. Then I think the album starts sequenced really well, because I think then going into Spinal Meningitis is quite melodic, but it shows that we're not going completely normal. We're not selling out. We are still going to do some weird stuff, which that song definitely is. Great guitar solo. I think this is the first real Guitar God album that they put out, to me, where he really gets to flex his muscles. And then you get into Freedom of 76, which is absolute S tier. Unbelievable vocal performance. One of the best vocal performances I've heard at any song. It's unreal. And then you get, Can't Put My Finger on It is ridiculous, but kind of in the best way. I don't really listen to it that much outside of the context of the album, but I think in the album's flow it works well. Tear for Eddie is very cool, good guitar. It's not, I don't know, it's not one, again, there's a few of these that I like when I'm listening to them, but I'm not really drawn to them to re-listen to them. The same goes for Roses Are Free, which is a real fan favorite. Might get me in some hot water there, but I don't know. And then you get some more great stuff like Baby Bitch is kind of eerie how much it sounds like Elliott Smith, even though this came out the same year as Roman Candle, which, Elliott Smith wasn't really a thing, but it sounds like they're parodying Elliott Smith, which is really strange how that comes to be. And then you get, Mr. Would You Please Help My Pony is really fun. I actually quite like Drifter in the Dark. I think it's quite a fun, not fun, it's kind of like a slow dancey type tune. Very funny vocals, I've always thought, and it's short and sweet. And then you get Voodoo Lady, which is probably one of their more well-known songs, I would say. It's another one that starts being fairly normal, and then it just descends into this like maddening, just insane noise part. I think Joppa Road is really pretty nice, nostalgic vibe to it. Candy, it's quite a slog. It's quite a stumbling block in the album. I think Buenos Tardes Amigo is a really cool story song. It does run a smidge too long for me, but yeah. And then you know that theory that the penultimate tracks are the best. What Dina was talking about definitely fits into that really sentimental song, just about understanding what your friend has been going through, and I think that's a really good sentiment. I absolutely adore that song. And I've always thought "Don't Shit Where You Eat" is a great closer. I don't know. I just think it works really well to sort of sum up everything. And I think there's a lot of greatness on this album. There's definitely some fat that could be trimmed, and I think they are close to their peak as musicians. They're very close, not quite there. So yeah, the overall length of the album, I think it's 55 minutes, and the fact that it can get a bit tiring because it's every song is so different, and it's a lot of not much coherence in the track list, but I
Mm.
still have a lot of fondness for this album. And you know, I wouldn't say it's the most accessible album, but it might be a good first one to listen to just because it gives you the broad spectrum of everything that they do, even though I don't think it's their best. So Chocolate and Cheese lands at number 3. I'm really not sure on the rating. I'm going to stick with an 8 just because I think they're like Candy and mainly Candy, and the HIV song. But it's still a great album, and it would probably make my top 10 of '94. Maybe I'm quite a harsh grader, so yeah.
Yeah, 94 is pretty stacked, as you mentioned, and that's tough to rate in the context of an entire year, of course. My number 3 is also Chocolate and Cheese. We finally got one. So I agree with a lot that you said here. This is one of the more, I guess, commercially and socially accepted records. You still have some drum machine here, um, but the guitar work and songwriting, I think, are just about as good as it gets for Ween here. Um, there's Dean's guitar just sounds incredible on so many tracks and is raw when needed. There's almost too many classics to name. Um, I am also a little bit torn on Candy, Buenos Tardes, and HIV. I think that Buenos Tardes is a great song, like as a story and maybe kind of a novelty, but it's hard to sit and listen to every time you want to hear the album. I think I did that for a while, and I'm kind of overhearing all of it. So um, this album is a total delight to listen to. Even Candy through Buenos Tardes and HIV song, I think the end tracks, like you mentioned, um, I think they more than make up for that slow bit, and I think I do think this is a great introduction for the band because, like you said, it showcases many different styles with Freedom of 76 on here. Uh, I really love Roses Are Free, Baby Bitch, that whole stretch there. A Tear for Eddie is one of my favorite instrumentals of theirs. So I just think that the performances are just incredible from both Dean and Gene. Um, awesome record. I give this a 9, despite the fact that I even maybe like one song less than you do. Um, this is an all-time great for me. Chocolate and Cheese. It's my number 3. They do have better music, but this is undeniably part of the core Ween experience, and definitely a great starting point to anyone interested in listening to Ween.
Very well said. We've been going for over an hour, so if you've made it this far, I thoroughly appreciate it. And what do they say? Like button, subscribe, something like that.
Like and subscribe.
Do all that stuff. So we matched up once. Will we do it again? We have the same top 2. What the order? I don't know about you, but it's kind of 1A and 1B for me rather than 1 and 2. It's kind of it's very. I thought about flipping it a couple times, but
Sure.
the album that has been my favorite remains my favorite. And the one that got even better on re-listen, as it does on every listen, and it keeps creeping up, it's the Mollusk at number 2. It's getting so close to that number 1 spot. Because, like I said, when I first heard this album, I wasn't blown away. And then I didn't re-listen to it for a while because I was like loving Quebec and loving chocolate and cheese. And for some reason, I didn't come back to this album because I was like, oh well, it's got some good songs, but there's a lot of songs I don't remember on it. And then as soon as I did re-listen to it, it all came, it just hit me, and I was like, yeah, this is some good stuff. But yeah, I think this is perhaps, I think this is the best blend of Ween in the sense that the production makes everything very coherent, but they
Mm.
still are being adventurous and being silly and you know, it's interesting. Like, not all the songs are about underwater environment or anything like that, but I think the production, even on the songs that aren't about that, kind of hold it all together and give you that sense of that concept album feel, even though it isn't really a concept album. But you got like the effect, like the helium vocals on Mutilated Lips, which is, I don't know, just has like a nautical feel, and the sea shanties and all that kind of stuff. But as I have done with a few of these, I think with these top ones, it's worth going track by track because there are so many good ones. Um, I think I'm Dancing in the Show Tonight might be my least favorite on the album. I think it's still good, but I think what comes afterwards is in a different level. I love the title track, great lyrics, great sense of wonder, very easy guitar riff I can just play when I'm bored, um, and sort of sing it to myself. And I think Polka Dot Tail and the Blarney Stone have this very deranged sea shanty vibe to them. And of course, Steven Hillenburg was a big fan of this album before he made SpongeBob, and you can kind of see, you know, the sort of even the voices that the guys do on the album kind of reflected in SpongeBob, which is quite fun. Um, I think I'll Be Your Johnny on the Spot is a barnstormer. It's a great sort of more punky track, which I think they have like a token punky track on most of their albums, which is kind of fun. Great guitar solo on that one too, unbelievable. Mutilated Lips is great, like I mentioned. Yeah, the Blarney Stone. I think that was probably the biggest one that when we were doing those listening parties and listening to the albums again, that was the one that grew in my estimations the most because I liked that song, but hearing it and then everyone was sort of getting into it, and the sort of it's very memorable and very sing along, and I don't know, I love that song. Um, and then obviously you get It's Gonna Be All Right, which is really heartfelt and beautiful. Um, Golden Eel is kind of I don't want to say proggy, but it's quite symphonic, quite theatrical, which I like. Um, I mean, it's almost like they have a one bad song per album quota, Ween, which I think Pink Eye on My Leg gets close to doing, but I think it's still decent, and I think it works well within the flow, better than I'm Dancing in the Show Tonight does as an opener for me anyway. But then you get the final 4 tracks, which I think could be, Abbey Road medley aside, one of the best 4-track runs to end an album. To be honest, like because you get Waving My Dick in the Wind, which is just glorious, fun, amazing song. Buckingham Green, which is this epic, proggy masterpiece with probably the best guitar work in the whole discography. Um, Obviously, you have Ocean Man. I mean, Ocean Man is Ocean Man. I don't know what I can add to the discussion. It's Ocean Man. It's great. Um, and then you get She Wanted to Leave, which is another one that's grown on me a lot. Another one where he sort of has the sea shanty type vocals, but it's a more heartfelt song than something like the Golden Eel or not Polka Dot Tail or the Blarney Stone, which I think really helps it. And yeah, I think the album does jump around its styles, but it remains cohesive and sticks to its sort of general musical theme. Um, I'm now thinking this should have been number 1, but I can't. It's too late.
Too
it's
late. You already said it on film.
I know it's gonna be my number 2, and it is like
This might haunt you.
it's like this close to a 10. It's so close. I love it so much, and I'm going to say it already that Quebec doesn't get a 10 either. I'm quite strict with my full scores, but those are both right there. They're like both in my top 50 albums of all time. I think they're both glorious, shows so much musical diversity, and yeah, anyone who thinks they're just a comedy band should just shut up, basically.
Fair enough. Uh, strong showing for the Mollusk, um, which is framed over here. Um, not actually the show I went to, but they had spares of that poster, so I picked it up. Um, the Mollusk is also my number two.
Wow, so we line up
So
completely for the
we
top
we
three.
will match all of our our gold, silver, and bronze medal standings will be exactly the same. And I have a lot of similar things about the Mollusk. You know, concept album mostly, um, known for inspiring SpongeBob entirely. If you just play Dancing in the Show tonight to someone, they'll probably think about SpongeBob. The voices, as you mentioned, sound very much like SpongeBob and maybe a little Patrick in there. I think it's great from start to finish, and it's just such a fun ride. Every time there's something that I pick out um, that I love more than the last time, and the nautical psychedelic themes are just they just keep coming, and the sound just works. These guys are just masters of this sound. This was my first full album after knowing Ocean Man and not much else. Um, Listened to it based on a sole recommendation, and yeah, I couldn't believe that I hadn't heard it before, that other people weren't talking about it, and that it didn't already exist. Even though it's been a long time since it was released, that this kind of music wasn't that this wasn't already made, that this wasn't a direct ripoff of something. Um, it sure has a lot of influences, but I think it influenced a lot that came after it as well. And so I think as much as it borrowed, it is owed in terms of um, influences. So I don't believe this album has a dud on it. Even the instrumental is like funny, and I don't know how they manage that, but it's just comical, and it makes you want to set sail. Um, so I I don't know. I love this album. It's an instant classic. Like you said, anyone who thinks that Ween is just a joke album should just sit and listen to this album in its entirety. Give it a try, and I think everyone can find something that they'll like here. Um, you mentioned kind of track by track. I don't have a whole lot to add to that. I think everything is just a winner here. Obvious highlights are the Mollusk, Mutilated Lips, It's Gonna Be All Right. I even really like Cold Blows the Wind, which is a tribute to the Unquiet Grave. Um, Buckingham Green, Ocean Man. There's just it's every other song is a notable hit, and it really makes the whole album just a delight to listen to when you have that many hits throughout. I'm maybe a little bit looser and gooser with my 10s, so this is a 10. This is probably in my top 30 albums of all time. I love this album, and it's not even my number one. I'm a big Ween stan, so take that with a grain of salt, but this gets a 10 from me. And yeah, it is hard to place this at number two because of that. But I think the album we're both going to talk about next is even stronger. So there you have the Mollusk. Check it out.
Very well said. Very, very well said. And don't let my, I feel like people who have watched me enough, like they know my system by now. They know that I love this band, and one track is enough to stop me from getting to the 10. So
Fair
yeah,
enough.
and we're going to talk about one track stopping now from getting to a 10 as well, again, because I'm talking about Quebec, which is also a 9 for me. But again, it's sort of like a 9.9 or a 9.8 or something like that. It's right on the cusp there. I think this is a masterpiece in tone, is what I would say, because yeah, it's as serious as Ween can get in one album, I would say, because it's going to be a long night, which is a romping opener, and it has this weird darkness to it, which I don't think I really picked up on the first listen because I didn't really know what I was getting myself into because I was kind of expecting more of the same from Chocolate and Cheese. But especially on re-listen, I know that song really sticks out as like even just the title. It's going to be a long night. It's kind of like a pessimistic song, um, and I think that is a great way to open the album, and that flows into Zoloft, which is such a pretty psychedelic, weird song. Then you get Transdermal Celebration, which was one of the first Ween songs I heard. I think it was on a Spotify Discover Weekly, if I'm not mistaken.
Ah,
And that came on and that do 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 opening riff, and I was like, "Whoa, this is killer!" And it is. It's still one of my favorites, and it is gonna be showing up in the songs list. Spoilers. Among His Tribe is really fabulous as well. I think the reverby backing vocals kind of remind me of Fleet Foxes, which is kind of cool since this sort of predates Fleet Foxes. You get so many people in the neighborhood, which again I talked about with Godwin Satan that I like that album because it feels like the kind of stupid music that me and my friends make when we meet up and we jam. And so many people in the neighborhood kind of has that same vibe where it's just ridiculous and it feels like it wasn't written beforehand. They just had like I don't know a drum loop or something there, so let's just play something, and then that's what ends up on the album. I'm not saying that is what happened, but that's what it comes across as, and that's charming to me. And that leads into Tried and True, which is probably the most, one of the most accessible songs on the album. I think it's brilliant. That riff, the sitar solo is fantastic as well. I think, yeah, a real all-time favorite for me. And like I said, yeah, it covers so much ground, but unlike Chocolate and Cheese, it has a level of cohesion because there is that sort of more melancholic feel to it. Happy Colored Marbles is fun, but I think it's a step down from the absolutely insane level of quality that this album starts at. That's sort of a slight dip, but it's still a great song. I think Hey There Fancy Pants is a really, really fun song. Very easy to listen to. I've listened to it quite a lot. Captain is a bit sleepy, but it's got a cool atmosphere, which I like. It works in the flow of the album. Um, and then we swoop right back into the gems with Chocolate Town, really pretty. And that's followed by I Don't Want It, which is a crushing ballad where you really get a sense of where this album is coming from. The absolutely perfect guitar solo, the tone on that guitar is just amazing. I don't know how it sounds that good. Also, yeah, this and the Mollusk were both produced perfectly as well. I think that's something that people don't talk about much. The
hmm.
sound is just perfect for what they were going for. Um, the Fuck Jam, it's not great. It's not like completely unlistenable like some of their other songs, but it is. It's those really long pauses that really frustrate me. It's like it's fine, and then it's just like a seven. I don't know. They're trying to annoy me, and that's the point. But I still don't enjoy it. It's over like after it's like 3 minutes long, so it's yeah, not great. And that is the block that comes on every Ween album for me. There is a track that kills the momentum a little bit, but it still has some of my all-time favorite songs on it. So maybe I should just reevaluate my rating system and just. But anyway, I think Alcan Road is cool. Great atmosphere as well. Very vivid lyrics. Some of the best lyrics on that song, I think. I think the Argus is great. Sort of multi-part song. Again, that and Ocean Man and You Are the Fool and this penultimate track thing. It's making a lot of sense.
There's something to that. Yeah, yeah.
And then yeah, if you could save yourself, you'd save us all. I think my main issue with it is that I think there's too much of a divide between the verse and the chorus. Like they feel like they're from two different songs. But the chorus
Hmm.
is so amazing. I think it's just a brilliant, brilliant chorus. I can kind of forgive that and still enjoy the song. Um, and yeah, it's a great way to close the album. And a lot of people, think that this should have been their final album. I don't know about that because I like the music we got afterwards. But if this was their final album, it would be an incredible way to go out. And I think it is a journey through Wayne's usual goofiness, whilst also featuring some real tenderness that they kind of didn't get too personal, aside from a couple tracks. But this is, especially on tracks like I Don't Want It, I think really explore where they were at the time. So yeah, Quebec is my number one. I love it. I think it's great. Probably my 2003 album of the year, maybe.
Probably, maybe.
Probably.
Uh, very well said. Um, Obviously, Quebec is my number one as well. To me, this is just Ween at their finest. Um, the performances, the art here is just so good throughout. Um, they're bizarre, they're earnest. The performances from both Dean and Jean are just awesome. Um, it is kind of a noisy album at times, and um, definitely ventures into some weird art rock territory. But the ride is just so much fun. Um, you mentioned starting off with going to be a long night. It just sounds like a cocaine fueled romp that is kind of threatening. And then it just slips you right into the narcotic sounding Zoloft. So kind of um, that transition really just makes you wonder what the heck you're getting into. And they kind of stay on this weird path for the next couple songs. Uh, you know, um, really through "Hey There, Fancy Pants." I think "Tried and True" I think is a beautiful kind of love song. Someone interpreted it as like a love song from the sun to the moon, which I think is interesting to think about. But in any event, I think it's a gorgeous track. And I do like Among His Tribe, So Many People in the Neighborhood. I think they venture appropriately into, some different sounds. Um, I skipped Transdermal Celebration. That song is just almost perfect. I think it's really great. Uh, Great rock song. I think everyone sounds fantastic on that. Um, Happy Colored Marbles, pretty good. I like that it breaks out into the chaos. Um, and Hey There, Fancy Pants, pretty fine. Um, not one of my all-time favorites, but I like it in the context of the album. And that's the same with Captain. I actually really like Captain in the context of the album. Probably won't go out of my way to listen to it, but when you're listening through this album, it's kind of a welcome break from the chaos and Captain, turn the ship around and take me home. It's just very atmospheric and really like that. And the back of this album is just so loaded with great tracks that um it's almost hard to hard to distinguish. I love Chocolate Town. May or may not be about buying heroin in Hershey, Pennsylvania. um I Don't Want It is I'm going to talk about that later. Great track, just absolutely beautiful. Heartbreaking and beautiful, and just maybe the most earnest song they've ever written. The Fuck Jam, another contextual song for the album, I think. They have to throw one in, I guess, because of who they are. And it's a little frustrating. The pauses, I don't disagree with you. I can deal with it. I'm not going to put it on outside of the context of the album ever, but
You're not going
I'm
to put
not
it
going to skip
on.
it.
Yeah, you're not gonna put it on the wedding playlist, are you?
No, no, it won't make the wedding playlist. In fact, not many will, but definitely not the Fuck Jam. It's probably the worst of their instrumentals for me. That said, I don't think it takes much away from this album. You have Alcan Road, into the last two tracks, which I think are both just among the best songs they've ever written. So altogether, there's so much greatness, and the soundscapes of this album, the performances from both Dean and Jean, um, are just fantastic. I think an awesome journey through what makes Ween great, and this record just explodes in quality. So this is a 10. This is I don't think it's maybe not in my top 10 albums of all time, but I'm pretty confident it makes my top 15 um, of all time. I love this record. It is just it's my favorite. It's a 10. I don't know what else I can say. You've said a lot. I've said a lot. There you have it. We both shared our top three, and I'm glad we agreed on Quebec.
Yeah, it was close. I'm sure it was close for both of us.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
but I think even I think our biggest difference was was it La Cucaracha and pure, or was it pure guava? One of those two were only a couple spots different, but we didn't have any where it was like drastically different. I don't think.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, even our 4 and 5 were just swapped.
Yeah. So yeah, listen to
Cucaracha, I
us.
did have that as last, but yeah,
We're right. So just listen
we're
to
right.
us, and
Yeah.
yeah. Um, I, this has run longer than the Beatles, actually,
Oh my
even though
gosh.
it's three less albums. But you know what? Great discussion. Thank you very much for coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. And
We'll
this
find
was a blast.
we'll find another artist at some point we can do that we both like.
Absolutely.
That'll be fun. Um, and yeah, we'll have a songs video coming as well. I just hit 100 subscribers, so that was exciting. Hopefully, many more to come. And I'm actually sitting on quite a few videos recorded that I need to edit. I'm going to be moving soon. So maybe the videos will be coming a bit slower, but they'll still be coming. And yeah, stick with us here. And if you don't know Ween and you've sat through this whole video, um, I recommend you check out our top 3 albums at least. I think they're all worth your time. And yeah, that's all there is to say. And hopefully, I'll catch you soon.